The topic of Xbox Game Pass somehow being a deterrent to the industry as a whole has been played out, and it's tired. We have seen Sean Layden really go to town on throwing Game Pass under the bus. He's come out and said that he would like a world where there are $80 games. He would like smaller and quicker developed IP, meaning that the games would be smaller, they would be put out quicker, but they would cost more. No, I don't know if Sean is trolling sometimes or he's being serious, but he's also a millionaire. And see, this is where you're going to see the horns come out from Mr. Boomstick, because nothing pisses me off more when you have C-level or former C-level executives that have millions in the bank, right? And come out and tell us, the gamer, try to talk to us, the common folk, about money. Please don't do that, because you have no right. And again, I'm not a hater, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a congratulator. If you figured out a way to have $1 million or more in your bank account, good for you. But what I will not stand for, and what I will have a lot of pushback for, is when people try to tell you that a service is somehow a detriment to gaming as we know it via developers not finding enough money from being in the service, or the service somehow being too much of a pressure on developers to deliver. Folks, the reason I'm bringing this up, and I want to get into it more specifically, is a quote from Pete Hines. Now, Pete Hines, if you know, or maybe you don't, was a big part of Bethesda Softworks for years. And he left a couple of years ago in what was a very surprising move. Now, some people suggested that he was asked to leave, and others, he just wanted to retire and get back to not worrying about budgets and deadlines and things like Xbox Game Pass ruining the industry. Well, he was just interviewed at doubletap.com, and I'm going to spell it out for you. So if you want to check out the article, I will add the article to the show notes. It's dbltap.com. And they interviewed him, and again, it was a very good interview, ladies and gentlemen. And Pete talked a lot about his early days at Bethesda and some of the trials and tribulations that he had at his time at the studio. He was there for 24 years. But it's what he said. There were a couple of things that he said, but I want to focus on these two particular points, gentlemen and chat. And I'll start with this. According to the article, and according to Pete Hines, the tension of Game Pass is hurting a lot of people, including the content creators themselves, i.e., the developers. And of course, he goes on to say, secondly, they're fitting into an ecosystem that is not properly valuing and or rewarding what they're making. Okay, so is it what he said terrible? Well, it's his opinion, ladies and gentlemen. There's another little piece of information that came out during this interview, Fuzzy Belvedere, that he does pro bono work, which is admirable, for smaller developers. So basically, he's taking the time out of his retired day to advise smaller developers on how to navigate the very difficult waters of game development and, of course, selling your game ultimately. Well, that's awesome. Pete, I want to pat you on the ass, sir. That's amazing. But here's the problem. He's doing it pro bono, which I think is amazing. And if you don't know what that means, he's doing it for free. Why do you think he's doing it for free? Because he is loaded, ladies and gentlemen. He's a millionaire. He was a millionaire before he left. He was a millionaire the minute Bethesda was picked up by Xbox and Microsoft, because he had shares in the company. And he was even a more millionaire when Activision obviously came over because he's a part of the company and he made a lot of money. He's a millionaire, ladies and gentlemen. Same as Sean Layden. Sean Layden is a millionaire. So where I have an actual problem is millionaires who don't and can't discuss gaming as it is on our level as consumers, right? That's where I have a problem. And interestingly enough, gentlemen, one of the biggest takeaways from many of these C-level executives, or at least former C-level executives, is that every time they speak, the consumer is never a part of that conversation. The consumer is me and Fuzzy and Chaos Lounge and you fine folks, right? I don't think Pete Hines is worrying about having to buy a game. Not because he's getting them for free, because he can buy anything he wants. The same thing with Sean Layden. That's where I have a love for Xbox Game Pass, because you pay $20 and you get a plethora of entertainment in one place. Now, nothing's stopping you from buying the game. You can buy everything in Xbox Game Pass, but you get it at a discount. But if you decide to play, let's say, for instance, Black Ops 7 this fall, and you don't want to buy the game, but you want to pay $30 for the upgrade to the Vault Edition, you can do that. And you're getting the $100 edition for your price of admission, which is $20 a month, and your $30, which is actually not 30, it's 10% off. So it's about 27 and change, to be honest. And again, you're not going to hear me try to throw Pete Hines under the bus. He is a professional in the business for over 25 years. And I know there's going to be some people like, oh, look at this Boom trying to, to say that he knows about gaming more than Pete Hines. I never said that, folks. I'm saying that from a consumer's point of view, what he's saying and what Sean Layden is saying is hogwash. So, of course, I responded, ladies and gentlemen, to this, and I put out my own tweet. And the tweet goes on to say, hold on a second, let me just reset this, and I will read you my personal tweet. And I mean, folks, again, I'm being politically correct here. I'm not being an a-hole. I don't ever like to do that. Like I said, Pete Hines is in and has been a part of the business for a long time. I just think some of his commentary is wrong because he's coming at it from a millionaire's point of view. The one thing I will say, and this is confirmed, folks, you can go look it up yourself. For every one bad actor that tries to get clout by saying Xbox Game Pass is bad because of, there are 50 other stories from smaller devs that got into Xbox Game Pass and saw incredible success. When you look at the gaming scope of and coming at this from a developer's point of view, I'm not a developer, but if you are a developer out there and you are trying to put out a game and that game is good, mediocre, or terrible, the people will tell you how your game is. You are fighting thousands of games that release yearly, right? I mean, look how many games were added to Steam last year. It's a ridiculous number. You are trying to get your game noticed in a sea of other developers. See, that's the difference with Xbox Game Pass, because you guys know it and I know it. Every time there's going to be new games announced for Xbox Game Pass, what is it, folks? It's a community event. Everybody is going to Xbox Wire or their favorite content creator to hear about what new and old games are being added to the service for September, October, November, December, right? We all look forward to finding out what new games we're going to play. That's free advertising. And if somebody decides to get on the Game Pass train, they're going to get noticed because everyone is talking about Xbox Game Pass, what's coming that month. That's another great aspect of Game Pass. It's advertising for games that might not get that shine because they're trying to bustle and hustle to the front of the line so you will notice it, consumer. And you know what? Another thing that Pete Hines and Sean Layden and many of the anti Xbox Game Pass community never talk about? Black hole games. The free to play model is what destroyed this industry because you have folks that will play Apex Legends until their fingers are bleeding. Same thing for stuff like Minecraft or, pick your favorite, gas game, Warzone, Apex Legends, Fortnite. I mean, the list goes on, right? When you have those type of games that people just get lost in, that's why people aren't buying as many games as they used to. Not because of Xbox Game Pass. But, Fuzzy, I want to bring you in, brother. Again, according to Pete Hines, the tension of Game Pass is hurting a lot of people, including the content creators themselves, i.e. the developers. I find that to be hogwash. I do, because no one says you have to be an Xbox Game Pass. It is an avenue that you can get into. And by the way, there's a waiting list. You can't just walk up to the front of the line and be like, hey, I'm here, game A in Game Pass. That's not the way it works. Your game has to be seen and thought of by people who run Xbox Game Pass. But yeah, this is a game that would do good for our consumers. You're in. Here's a bag of money. Go. What are your thoughts on all of this anti-Xbox Game Pass rhetoric? And more importantly, the newest former C-level executive, Pete Hines, having what he had to say.
I think the thing is we have to look at from what angle they're looking at it from. As far as that tension, from somebody like his position, it makes sense for him to say something like that because I guess the biggest thing is he's got to make sure that the people under him, or at least in his previous role, were getting this game within a certain timeline because they were expected to release it on this service within this, window. And remember, I kind of look at his downfall was Redfall to some extent because, and I won't say he was directly responsible, but it felt like he was part of the all hands on deck for Starfield. And then, oh, you guys are good over there at Redfall? You need any help? No? Oh, well, they didn't respond fast enough. So he just went back on focusing on Starfield. So I guess there's some tension when you're one of the higher level management or C-level executives that, you have a deadline. You got to make these numbers work by this set date. And if things aren't going the way as planned, you got to, get your butt chewed by your boss or figure out whether you might be cleaning out your desk at the end of the week kind of thing. So is there tension with Game Pass? Yeah, I would have to assume that there might be some in the sense of working towards whether they should go with Game Pass or, avoid being in Game Pass, but watch something that's in Game Pass get a lot more exposure and coverage and a lot more, gamers playing it, talking about it on social media. Is that worth the advertising dollars that you'll have to spend in going in the opposite direction? Like if you're just going to launch this game as normal, what kind of advertising budget do you have? What kind of marketing plan do you have? Do you have a strategy for that would be able to not only cover your expense for the game, but also bring in a profit for your next game and keeping the lights on continually? I'm pretty sure there are all kinds of devs out there that would love to be in it and would loathe to be in that service. But I do also have a problem where people that are kind of removed from the daily expense to some extent of the average person. Millionaires aren't necessarily the top 1%, whatever, but they are a good bit removed from the average person. The average person might not be making six figures. And with that being said, the economy being what it is, there's going to be a whole bunch of different types of tension, whether you have to look at your utility bills or your grocery lists. There's going to be tension. But like you said, free-to-play games, I think, are a bigger factor in the detriment to gaming. And it's not that it's a complete detriment. It's against what has been the norm for so long. you're going to have to adjust to some extent. And Game Pass is kind of that adjustment to some extent. Although a lot of these studios that seem to be having these problems probably should focus more so on staying on budget or figuring out what the scope of the game is and the budget's going to be from get go. A lot of times we see games that they have this grand idea and they may have had a budget in mind, but by the time they actually put pen to paper or finger to keyboard type of thing, the budget's exploded. Either the cost of the talent is much more, the resources to be able to use the mocap is more, or you'd have to pay more for the licensing rights for the engine or the licensing rights for the IP behind the idea. So I think those that are having trouble currently and don't want to be in Game Pass, they have to really dig deep as far as what that budget looks like, what the talent they have, what resources they have access to, and how scalable that is if they want to make it a bigger game or if they want to keep it a smaller experience. These free to play games are going to be the big thing that everybody's talking about because they didn't have to spend any money technically to play the game. You don't have to pay, the monthly fee for being online on a console for these free to play games. You don't have to pay for the free to play game. The most you might have to pay for is the season pass or a particular skin that you want. And since it's a lot less than the $70 that you would be shelling out for a full-fledged game, most people don't really look at that expense as far as those other things that they're purchasing within the game as a big deal, much like the mobile model, as far as where, oh, I can play this game for 4 hours. Oh, I ran into a roadblock. A quarter for another 15 tries, sure, or $1 for 100 tries, sure, I'll spend that dollar. This is fun. And you don't think that, hey, maybe if I just bought the game for $5 or $10 and never had to worry about paying those fees, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But when they hit you after you're locked into this game for another dollar or whatever, you're going to want to continue because they got their hooks in you at that point. But all in all, I think somebody like Pete Hines has some valid points, but I'm going to disagree on the sense that Game Pass is the only bad thing going on in the gaming industry. Free to play games, or live service games or games as a service is more of an issue where newer games that aren't that are going to have to, find a more creative way to get a bigger audience or exposure to a bigger audience. So whether that means you're paying streamers or you're spending millions on marketing, or you just have a downright good game that people can see clearly in either a beta test or in the video clips that you put online, it's going to be a hard fought battle for people's dollars and their attention. And that, to me, that seems like a bigger problem. Like putting a game on Game Pass, if that's the goal and you're part of that publisher, like if you're within the Xbox fold, I think you can understand. Hopefully the C-level executives stay on the same messaging, but if your game is meant to, keep people engaged in the service and keep them subscribed, and your game does that, then that needs to be something that the executives look at when they look at those spec sheets, or not spec sheets, but they're looking at the revenue sheets and things along those lines. Well, how many copies did we sell? Well, how many hours are people playing? Is this generating revenue, or is this keeping people subscribed? I think that needs to be the bigger discussion amongst the C-level executives, that something like Tango and Hi-Fi Rush don't wind up repeating themselves, where you do have a game that was a bit of a draw. It had a great reception and was critically acclaimed, but they really needed, at least it seems like, based on how Tango was shuttered, although they've been since picked up, it seems like that messaging or that understanding wasn't finite. So it was like, no, you needed to sell units. And I don't know if they knew that they needed to sell those units to keep the lights on. I don't know. That's the part that can get a little confusing, that I know a lot of these naysayers will keep nitpicking at. But I think the bigger thing is there are other, elephants in the room that are probably more of a detriment financially. And some of that is, willfully making bad decisions on some of these, black hole games. Like look at Call of Duty right now, because they see the momentum of Battlefield 6, they're talking about not carrying over all the crazy skins that, some people were complaining about. Now, people spent money on those skins, and it didn't seem like it was a problem until it was. So sometimes you have that as a bigger detriment because, well, they're making a jump decision based on this upcoming game. But if that upcoming game doesn't succeed, then did you make a jump decision for no reason at that point? So there's just so many moving pieces to it. I get what Pete's saying. I get what Shannon Loftus is saying as well, because I think she also made mention, although not to the same extent, but it was more so a matter of, these are the discussions that the devs and the publisher themselves or the C-level executives need to have a more written in stone kind of understanding of what their purpose is. Hey, it's to keep subscribers and engagement. Or no, this one we need to sell more copies. And for whatever reason, it seems like in some cases, not just at Microsoft, this seems to change, because if you look at PlayStation with their games as a service and then their cancellations as games as a service, there doesn't seem to be this consistent messaging between the publisher and the dev. So that's where some of the other problems come into play as well. So it's a big mess, but I think there's bigger messes out there that are more of a problem.
I'm a numbers guy, right? I'm an evidence-based conversation kind of a podcaster, because we can all have our opinions, gentlemen, and chat. But what is hard to argue are facts, are numbers. So I wanted to make sure that I was correct in what I was about to say, so I went and looked it up. Now, Steam is what? One of the biggest platforms in gaming. I mean, there's not even an argument about that. It is the biggest part of gaming as we know it. Well, last year, if you didn't know, folks, 19,000 games were launched on Steam in 2024. You didn't hear that wrong. I have the story literally in front of me. 19,000 titles were added to the platform. So think about that for a second. Whether you are a developer of one person, like Ponicle, for instance, with Vampire Survivors, or you have a team of 62, you had to, and most people will choose to put their game on Steam. Why? Millions of players peruse and buy games on Steam every year. Most people wait for sales, but for the most part, there's a lot of people, Chaos Lounge, that go to Steam to buy their games. It's one of the most popular platforms in gaming. But when you think about it from a developer's point of view, you are trying to release a game that has millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of players every day that buy games. You're also trying to jockey for position to get your game to be bought by those millions of people. And because 19,000 games came out last year, some games did not even get found. Now, this is where Xbox Game Pass comes into play, because like I said in the intro, every time Xbox Game Pass is going to have its monthly announcement, it is a bit of an event, right? Does it stop the presses? It doesn't stop the presses. But you do have places like Xbox Era talking about it. You have places like me and many other podcasts like, hey, guess what? X games, X, Y, and Z in the service for September. Oh my God, what a lineup. Some games are brand new. Some games are indie. Some games are AAA. Some games are older games that are back in the service. And what winds up happening is everyone that is an Xbox Game Pass subscriber is talking about what new games are coming to the service. And what is that? That's great for the developer, which, by the way, took a bag of money. Now, is sometimes that bag of money not enough to how many people are playing or downloading the games? Well, there is back end conversations in the contract with, if you have X amount of downloads and X amount of time played by gamers, you get extra bags of money. Now, I don't know that for sure. This is what I've heard. This is what I've talked about with people behind the scenes that are in the know. So they're written in these contracts that you just don't get a, like, for instance, oh, I want to put my game in Game Pass. Well, here's 10 grand, and it sells and makes Xbox Game Pass $100,000. You're like, well, wait a second. I feel like I got ripped off. Listen, it's business, folks. I don't know how the contracts are written, but I know that there is a lot of people speaking positively about Xbox Game Pass versus the negative ones. Like I said, if you listen to Christopher Dring, for instance, that guy at every turn takes a shot at Xbox Game Pass. Remember a couple of, was it last year, where he said he spoke to developers? Two of them. Oh, Game Pass wasn't our bag and we didn't get enough money. Dang. Two people, two developers he talked to. Does that mean that every Game Pass deal sucks? Unlikely. You know why? Because they keep getting people to put their games on Game Pass. Do you think that Xbox is begging people to put games in the service? No. Sarah Bond and her team go out and find these games. And if you just look at this year alone, look at 3 games. Blueprints is one of them, Game of the Year contender, right? Silk Song, oh my God, it broke the freaking internet last week. Game of the Year contender. Expedition 33, Game of the Year contender. But guess what, folks? All 3 of those games in Xbox Game Pass. Is anybody holding a gun to the Expedition 33 developers? Hey, put it in Game Pass or you're finished? No. They saw something in the game. They approached them. They gave them a price. Here's the bag. They like the bag, and they go. And guess what? Is that stopping anyone from PlayStation from buying the game or Steam? No. Sold gangbuster numbers. So, Chaos Lounge, when you hear this consistent rhetoric about Xbox Game Pass being the one that's gumming up the entire industry, forget the fact that there are thousands of games released every year, hundreds of games released every week, right? Everyone's battling and jockeying for position to get your attention so you could buy their game. There are black hole games, and a lot of people don't like the terminology. That's just what they are, folks. They're black holes. You go in and you stay there forever. That's just the way it is. And we know the free-to-play model is a big contributor to why the entire industry has changed. I want to get your thoughts on Pete Hines' opinions, as well as Sean Layden, because Sean has been another one. Every opportunity, he's like, Game Pass, streaming service, no good. I wish I thought of it first. I mean, I don't know. But what are your thoughts, Chaos Lounge?
So, in regards to Sean Layden, I just think he wants to stay relevant. That's it. I
feel that as well.
I think he's just trying to chime in and stay relevant, and he's trying to poke at stuff that are going to get the most controversy. Now, we know Xbox is always going to be a talking point, regardless of what they do. They could come out with the greatest and bestest thing ever. Someone out there is going to twist something. Now, something Peter Hines said, which I still don't understand, is the word tension.
Yeah.
What does he mean by this? He never really explained it. And I think Death of Duck in chat also said something very similar to this, asking where he was vague. He didn't really explain what this tension is. Now, is it coming from Microsoft? Is it coming from the business constraints? Like, what is this tension? Because at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything. Tension could just be, for how long is a piece of string? But I think this all stems from Tango Gameworks, because Microsoft probably has a part to play in this, where they said, Hi-Fi Rush succeeded beyond all expectations on all metrics. And then 5 minutes later, they shut the studio down. So there has to be some responsibility from Microsoft as to why this constantly happens. Now, in terms of the staff and the content creators, they're getting paid a salary. They come in, they do their work, they get paid, and they go home. Well, at least having worked in the industry, you'd hope it's that way, but it's not. You work long hours. But I think that's where Peter Hines was coming from in regarding to this. Like, my question, like, Game Pass is a great service, and Peter Hines was turning around and kind of comparing it to Spotify, where what you listen to is based on an algorithm, and he was trying to compare it to that. And I just don't think you can compare video games to an algorithm. That doesn't make any sense to me. Video games are just completely different. It's like movies. You can't compare a movie to music algorithms. The algorithm isn't going to work that way. So I think what he was trying to get at is, if Microsoft wants to go down this route of Game Pass, and Game Pass is a great service. It's saved me a lot of money. I mean, I've bought a number of games as well, but it's definitely evident that I buy less games because, especially with the single player games, why buy when it's on the service? Just like Mooch's, I think it was Woody not long ago. The guy was championing playing a game on the subscription service, and I'm like, but isn't that what Xbox gamers do on Game Pass? And it's okay for one, but not okay for the other.
Yeah.
But where do you get the monetization from a single player game? If there's no microtransaction, like say Indiana Jones, there's no microtransactions in that game. So what's the success rate for that? And I think that's where the tension is. Microsoft kind of needs to settle on what is acceptable and what is not. But I also think that just if it's a slow week, and if you want to be relevant, you're going to attack Xbox. You're going to attack the biggest fish on the pond, and that is Game Pass. That's it. I mean, if I made today an Xbox bad video, it's going to do gangbuster numbers. I think
yeah, it is.
Dirk Griggity actually tested it out not long ago, where he made one. Doc made one. It made gangbusters. It's so popular to hate on Xbox. So, I mean, you brought up Chris String. That guy, I don't know if he's actually got a hate boner for Game Pass, or if he just wants to stay relevant in the media by occasionally throwing out a "I hate Game Pass" post, because that's what it does. Because I don't think any of his sources are actually real. He just makes it up as he goes along. Because when you ask for his source, it's always like, well, let me clarify what I actually meant after he's done the damage. Or actually, what I actually meant was, right? So he's always kind of backtracking what he actually says. He doesn't stick to anything he's saying. I think with Peter Hines, I think he approached it in the wrong way, and he didn't explain it enough, and the person asking him the questions just didn't clarify, didn't follow up with the right questions to be able to understand what he meant by tension. The only thing I can personally think of is the Tango situation, which must have hurt them, because by all metrics, Aaron Greenberg came out with his chest eye, said, this game did amazing. It busted all metrics. We couldn't be happier. And then to go and close them, it didn't make sense. Regardless of the situation, it doesn't leave a good optic. But then you got the free-to-play stuff, like you were saying, and I play a lot of free-to-play games, whether it's Wuthering Waves, Genshin Impact, right? I spend a lot of time on these games. Do you know why? Because they get updates every 4 to 6 weeks. They keep me entertained. The story just keeps on going. They get new characters, new maps, new areas, new quest lines. It just keeps you invested. And yeah, sure. I mean, it's free to play, but you're obviously going to drop a few bob, but you can actually play them free to play. So you're also competing with these games as well at the same time for your time. I just think there's too many games at the moment that are coming out. Like, for me personally, I can't keep up with the number of games that are coming out. So I've stopped buying games and I buy them when I'm ready to play them. I bought Metaphor day one. When did Metaphor release? I don't even know, but I'm pretty
It
sure
was the
it's
middle of last year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
right. I haven't played it yet. I bought it day
Wow.
one, full price. It's on Game Pass now, but I still haven't found the time to turn around and play it,
That
which
game
is
is
why
ginormous, bro. It's you need to dedicate 3 lives to that game. It's big.
But this is the point. Like, if you're, as our generation are getting older, we have less time.
Yep.
We don't have the time to invest in sitting in front of a TV or a console or a hand or whatever it is, 24/7 gaming like we used to. We've got responsibilities, and the younger generation, they're just going straight to free to play. Like, I look at my kids, and they're constantly on just these weird and wonderful games like Repo and Valorant and stuff like that. They don't play single player games at all. Like, there's just no interest. All they do is multiplayer. But this topic of Game Pass is getting old.
Yeah, it is.
If it's good for Microsoft and Microsoft is happy, that's the end of story. At the end of the day, if a company is putting their game on Game Pass, then they are perfectly happy. Not that long ago, Abe's World, one of their latest game, I think it's been a couple of years. They put that day one on PlayStation Plus, right? But it was actually supposed to be a week after it got released. But they had to delay the game by a week. And so they tried to negotiate with Sony to say, hey, can we put it on PlayStation Plus a week later? Because it's going to cripple our sales. No one's going to buy the game. And Sony said no. And it almost sent them bankrupt. Sony didn't care. But you didn't see a single article talking about this.
I didn't even know about that, brother. That's news to me.
Right? I think I read one article about this, and that's because the CEO of the actual company was so irate about it and how Sony treated them. And he said he's basically never doing that with Sony again. Because it sure, they had a contractual obligation to release it on that day, but come on, it's just a week. The guy's asking basically, I've had to delay it because we found a bug. So we can't really release it on this time. But no one talked about that. And that almost shut a whole company down.
Wow.
But you've got Game Pass bad this, Game Pass bad that. And honestly, I just think it's just people trying to stay relevant and trying to keep themselves in the limelight. With Peter Hines, he needed to divulge more into what he meant by tension. But personally, the only thing I can think of is exactly what I said. And that is, with Tango Gameworks, staff must be looking around and saying, what do we need to do in this new ecosystem to maintain our jobs? And I think that's the direction he's coming from in terms of Game Pass and its tension, rather than a gaming side. It's more of a business side.